Hey everybody, it's Dr. May. How are you? Well, today I want to talk about something that a lot of us struggle with, and that's our inner critic. Okay, so I'm going to personify it as if it's like a little person chattering away in our brain, giving us negative messages. So I want to kind of talk about what that's all about and how we can deal with it better. Okay, so let's get screen up slowly. Here we go. All right. So ever feel like that guy on the screen with all these little people in your head chattering away at you? Now, for the most part, obviously, they're just our own thoughts, but they might feel like they're really powerful, right? Like they really could take over our day and make us feel bad. So that's why it's so important for us to deal with this, right? Or figure out ways to cope that are a little more effective than maybe what we've been trying already. All right, so I'm just going to give you a couple extra options. Not sure if they're going to work for you, but you can always give them a try. Okay. All right. So first is sort of like a few mindfulness questions just to be more aware of what's going on in our head. Because sometimes, we just get so lost in it and it becomes so typical for us that we don't really break it down. Okay. So the first question I'm going to have us reflect on is, whose voice do you hear? Is it like a person you know or knew in the past? Or is it like a few different people that kind of chatter away? Like some people might say like it's a parent, maybe that was critical to them and said certain things. And now you kind of hear their voice in your head, kind of saying the same kind of stuff to you as if it's like they're still there right now berating you. Other times maybe it's like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a friend you had or someone at school or a bully or whatever. But it could be anybody. But sometimes it helps just to identify, well, who is it? And maybe just write that down so it becomes more clear for you. Okay. Okay. Another similar question is a metaphor I really like, and it's who's driving your bus? I actually have done a reading called Who's Driving Your Bus in my DBT group for a really long time. And basically the metaphor is that sometimes instead of us being in the driver's seat, like someone from our past is in the driver's seat. Like they're kind of in our head dictating what we're thinking and dictating what we should do and what we shouldn't do and how we should be. And we're getting lost in all that. Like we're forgetting that, we're the really ones who should be in charge and we should be making the decisions about our life. So we have to learn how to kick some of those people to the back of the bus and get behind the wheel again, right? So it's that our wise mind is driving the bus rather than our emotional mind or the people in our head that are representing our emotional mind. Okay. So that's just another thing to think about. Okay. Another image you could use in this process of dealing with your self-critical voices inside. Okay. Okay. Next thing is identify what is it that your inner critic says. And this might be like a super easy thing for you to answer because you hear it all the time, but it could be a multiple messages, and maybe putting it down on a piece of paper very specifically could help, because now it's not just like something vague that's kind of floating in your head and feeling overwhelming. It's very concrete and on a piece of paper, something that you could just hold up and look at, right? So it's super clear to you. All right. So identify some of those. So then the next thing is, as you go through your day, I want you to step back from the seat of your wise mind, right? And your higher awareness, and just watch these thoughts, okay, with some curiosity, and just be aware or mindful of them just floating in and out of your head. And instead of responding to them with a lot of fear or anxiety or anger, just try to use more curiosity, like, oh, that's interesting. What's my inner critic telling me today? Oh, it's telling me I'm stupid? Oh, that's just interesting. Whose voice is that? Oh, was it my brother? Oh, okay. Just like in that very kind of curious, like, I wonder what that's all about way, right? So that prevents us from getting too wrapped up and emotional about it, right? And just like all the things that we're mindful of, like the objects of mindfulness, the thoughts come and go, right? So we can watch the thoughts come by and watch them pass by. But we also have to be willing to release them, right? Because sometimes we also kind of cling to them and hold on to them and allow ourselves to keep repeating them, right? So that's something we have to practice too, just to letting go, okay? And to also remember that that inner critic isn't the real you, okay? That the real you is really your wise mind, your pure loving awareness that's behind all of these thoughts that keep bothering you. So taking refuge in the real you and always going back to that seat of awareness is really important in this process, okay? Not that it's really easy, okay? It could feel like the thoughts are so overwhelming that it's hard to even find that seat of awareness, but with practice, you could get better at it, okay? And so long as you have that awareness to put more space around the thoughts, they could feel less overwhelming, okay? So keep practicing that, all right? It's worth it. Okay, so next is just to remember that it's really just a habit we developed. It's a thinking habit. Like some habits are behavior habits, obviously, like if I bit my nails all the time, that would be a behavior habit. But we also have thinking habits. And we get so used to that same old groove, that same old song that we keep playing over and over again, right? Or that same old horror movie we keep playing over and over again. So, but like any habit, a habit can change, right? It takes some time, but if we're aware of the habit and we have that mindfulness moment, and we can make a new choice and try to put different things in the mix, okay? So that's the good news. Okay, so here's another spin on it, right? That maybe we haven't really thought of too much. So in their own negative way, your inner critic is trying to help you, right? Does that sound kind of crazy? Like you just think it's torturing you, but on some level, it's trying to help you stay safe or stay out of trouble in some way. So let's think about this, right? What the heck do I mean by this? So let's say your inner critic is telling you you're no good, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're worthless, whatever it is, okay? Some kind of shaming thoughts. So those thoughts keep you kind of small and keep you from taking risks and being vulnerable. And on the inside, we're afraid that taking risks and being vulnerable, especially around certain people, is going to lead to us getting hurt. And that very likely might have happened to us in the past. So remembering this, our inner critic is trying to keep us small and keep us from taking risks because it wants us to stay safe. So that method may not be really effective for us right now, and it might be creating suffering. However, the intent behind it might actually be to help us. So that's like a different spin, right? I mean, it may not be so obvious that that could be the case. So in a way, we could almost thank them and say, well, thank you for trying to keep me safe. Like, I don't really like how you're doing it, but I appreciate the effort. Wouldn't that be a different spin on it? Just to like talk back to the voices and say, well, what are you trying to protect me from? Or, how could I help you better? Or maybe I can make you feel better. I don't know, different kind of thing, right? All right. So next, pros and cons. Okay, so if you're a DBT person, you learned about pros and cons. So if you're having a hard time letting go of your inner critic, maybe because part of you wants to stay safe, like, you want to keep it around because you're used to it and letting it go is a little scary, right? So make a pros and cons list, right? What's the pros of listening to your inner critic? And what's the cons of listening to your inner critic? And think of what you come up with, look at it, maybe share it with somebody, and see how it goes. All right, see what comes to mind. Okay, another thing you could do is do a reality check. All right, sometimes our mistake is that we take our thoughts as if they're the truth, right? So if I tell myself I'm no good, it means I'm no good. Or if I tell myself I'm ugly, it must definitely mean that I'm ugly. But sometimes we forget, like, wait a minute, just because my inner critic is saying that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Maybe it was just somebody's opinion when they told that to me a long time ago, but it's not actually the case, right? So if we step back and really examine them, it may just be like a judgment. It may not be the actual truth. So when we realize that, it might help give us permission to let go of some of these thoughts and move past some of these thoughts. All right, so just another idea to stir around in there, all right? Okay, another thing is, sometimes we're very ashamed about the things we're thinking, and we don't really like to tell people about it. But if you have a therapist or you have someone in your life that you trust, it may actually help a little bit to tell them what's been going through your mind. Sometimes airing it out and getting someone else's perspective on it or having someone talk you through it could like loosen their grip a little bit more, okay? And maybe they'll actually say something more encouraging to you and you could take that in and hold on to that to help you, okay? So some of their kind words might actually be healing in this process. So Give it a chance if you feel like there's somebody you can trust, all right? You don't want to make it worse and tell the wrong person, but if there's somebody you're comfortable with, you can give this a try. Okay, another thing, now these suggestions come from ACT, okay? So acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a little similar to DBT in certain aspects. So they're very into what they call like cognitive diffusion. So kind of like diffusing your thoughts and remembering that they're just thoughts. So they talk about like playing with your thoughts in all different ways, just to remind you that they're just thoughts and they're not real, okay? So here are some of these suggestions. So one is to repeat the self-critical message in a cartoon voice, right? You're just no good. You're just a real stupid idiot, right? So doesn't it sound a little silly now? It doesn't sound like so serious, like some big demon saying it. Now it's like a cartoon voice saying it, right? Or what if you imagine the voice coming from like a weird spot, like from your toes or something? So instead of coming from this big cloud in your head, now it's coming from your little pinky toe saying, hey, what's the matter with you? You're never gonna do anything right. Right? So now you can almost laugh about it because it's like a little silly when it happens that way. Okay? You could sing the critical message, make a silly song about it, sing it to row, row, row your boat or something and see what it sounds like now. All right? Now it's like a little bit different than the usual. You could also like imagine it in like a visual, like imagine it coming across the sky and like a plane, exhausted the plane when they make the messages in the sky, or in bubble letters, or in some kind of like, flashy graffiti or something like that. And now all of a sudden it has a different look and a different vibe, right? So when you do that, it sort of like changes the experience of the inner critic, okay? So I don't know, play with it, have fun. Be like a kid playing with your inner critic and doing dress up or something like that. I don't know, okay? All right. Another thing obviously we could do is sometimes we have a very hard time controlling our thinking. No matter what we try to do, it's just like, it just weighs on us and we can't shut our mind off, especially if we're like trying to go to sleep or something like that. So when all else fails, temporarily distract yourself. If you're in DBT, I would say use distract with accepts and use some of those as suggestions, but anything that kind of ground you in the moment and kind of something that you could really focus on and be engaged with, could help you distract yourself from your thinking. Okay, so whatever that happens to mean for you. All right, so, but that's a temporary relief. That's not going to fix the actual problem. It's just going to give you, a little break from it. I would use some of the other techniques I discussed before as a more like long-term solution. Okay? Okay, and another thing is you could always try to replace the thoughts. So like once you catch yourself thinking these inner critic thoughts or hear the inner critic talking, try to stop and switch to more positive or realistic thoughts. Sometimes it's hard to do that on the fly. It's hard to change your mind. So what you can do is when you're thinking more clearly and you're calm, write down some things on a piece of paper that you would rather think about instead. And have that paper available to you when you know you're going to need to want to practice changing your thinking. Okay? Or if you have a smartphone, go in the memo section and type it out there, and then you'll have it on your phone with you. So whatever works for you, okay? Or if there's a passage you like to read or a prayer you like to read, and you prefer to think that instead of your thinking, or self-affirmation, go for it, okay? So this is about switching your thinking, all right? But again, a little challenging sometimes, but also something you could add to your toolbox. Okay, and finally, when we have an issue, let's say we have a stressor, the self-critic will come in and start to berate us for that and talk negative to us. So the idea is if we have the stressor already or are already feeling down, instead, treat yourself with compassion, right? So don't make the original problem worse by the negative thinking. Try to make it better by having more radical acceptance, more compassion, more kindness, okay? So if you watch my compassion video, this goes into much more detail, but the three main aspects of self-compassion are mindfulness, right? So being aware of what you're feeling, self-kindness, right? So treating yourself kindly instead of negatively, and common humanity, reminding yourself that everybody goes through this pain. There's probably 1 million people right now that are feeling just what I'm feeling and struggling with this self-critical voice, okay? So I hope some of these techniques help you, right? This is a difficult issue. You might struggle with it for a while. So just be patient, but give it a try. You have nothing to lose, except, your self-critical voice. Okay. All right. Thanks guys for listening, and I'll see you soon. All right. Take care now.